Hey everybody, this is Mike Miller and welcome to Strike Up the Band. Today I have the honor of having Rodney Marsalis on. Rodney is one of the finest trumpet players around, and you've probably heard his last name. He's a member of the world famous Marsalis musical family. So Rodney, thank you so much for taking time to join me today.
Oh, Mike, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Uh, I like to ask everybody that comes on how they got their start in music, but with your family name, I think it would have been hard for you to not get a start in music.
It's true. It's funny in our family and in New Orleans in general, really, it's not even a matter of if you're going to play an instrument. It's just a matter of which instrument are you going to play. That's the question. So my mom and Ellis Marsalis, they sort of grew up. They were cousins, but they grew up like they were brother and sister. So when it came time to get an instrument, she just asked Ellis, and his advice was he needs to pick something where he could play a lot of different genres. So that's how I ended up playing trumpet.
Where are you in age compared to Wynton?
Wynton's 6 years older than me.
Okay.
So, back then when you're in high school, that makes a big difference because he was 16 and I was 10. So he was my first really serious private trumpet instructor.
Okay. Yeah. So what's it like to grow up in that family with everybody being so well known and just such talent all around?
Well, back then when I was a kid, when I was like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, well, when I would go over to the house, it was normal. That was normal for me to see that they had recordings everywhere. There was always discussions about music. There were always discussions, even about the definition of a word. So that was normal for me. And there was no thoughts of, oh, this is a famous family. That was just how the family was.
Okay.
And the boys were, Wynton and Branford and Ellis and Delphio, and they were all into athletics. They were all into a lot of different things. Wynton was really smart as far as school was concerned, and they all were. But I remember Wynton doing trigonometry homework in the middle of my trumpet lessons. And yet I'm pretty sure that a lot of schools like Harvard scouted him and wanted him to go there. So that was normal for me. Those were my influences early on. So I was just very lucky to be born into that family.
Tell us how you got started and moved on up in the musical world.
Oh, well, for me, it was the real start was the taking lessons with Wynton, because he introduced me to what it really took. He's the one who would put on recordings of Maurice Andre and say, this is what a really great trumpeter sounds like. And he's the one who showed me the basics. And it's like, this is how you work on your basic studies if you want to get better. So I always had that influence. So when Wynton went to Juilliard, then all of a sudden I was not going to have a teacher. So he brought me to his teacher, who's a man named George Jansen. And George Jansen was unique in that he was a guy who didn't care who he taught. He didn't care if you were black, white, male, female. He just wanted you to do the work. And he moved down there and he just started teaching everyone. And I think some people were like, why are you teaching these little black kids classical trumpet? And I remember George Jansen was like, you don't tell me who I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach whoever I want to teach. And he taught Wynton and Terrence Blanchard and me and a whole bunch of other kids we were playing very advanced cornet solos and early on in middle school and high school because of George Jansen. And so I worked with him after Wynton left. And then when it came time to go to school, I was fortunate enough to get into Boston University's Tanglewood Institute, which was like a summer thing. And I met a guy named Roger Voisin, who used to be principal of the Boston Symphony. And because initially I wanted to go to Juilliard or Eastman, but I didn't have the money for those schools, and Boston University gave me a full scholarship. So Boston University it was. But then that's when I realized, and that's when I learned, it's not the school, it's the teacher that matters. So Roger Voisin, in about 2 years, taught me how to win an orchestra audition, and at the same time, I was doing a lot of solo things. So and I won the solo competition there at the school, and so I ended up playing a solo with Boston Symphony, or what was the Boston Pops,
Oh,
with John Williams conducting. So
wow.
I was like 18 years old, and they're ushering me into the office with John Williams. And I remember, I remember he actually had a cup of tea, and he was like, let's go through this Artunian piece. And he sat at the piano, and he played the accompaniment to the Artunian concerto with me. And yeah, I mean, I was too young to really realize what was going on, like how important those moments were. But it was amazing. I ended up playing a solo with the Boston Pops. It was broadcast all over the country, um, and that was kind of my start. And then I just went into New Orleans Symphony, and that was my first job. And so I've kind of been playing solos with orchestras and playing and playing with my own ensemble now. But solos with orchestras, my own ensemble, and I had a bit of an orchestra career. So
Yeah, Mr. Voisin's son actually lives up in, I think, the Hendersonville Brevard area.
that's
And
right.
Peter, yeah, I've met him and actually corresponded with his wife on email about a few things. But they've got a nice brass ensemble up there,
Oh, that's fantastic.
and so you said you played in the New Orleans Symphony.
Yeah, so I played New
So
Orleans Symphony for well, it was basically only about a year and a half because, if that much, because the orchestra folded, which symphony orchestras, they have struggles, financially, and but it's funny because it was one of those instances in my life where it seemed like a bad thing at the time. It was the best possible thing that could have happened because I'd only done 2 years of study. I mean, I studied intensely when I was at Boston University. I mean, I practiced like 5, 6 hours a day, but I needed more study and I needed more exposure to the teachers out there. So when the orchestra folded, I went to New England Conservatory and I studied with Charlie Schluter at New England Conservatory for a little while. And then I went to Curtis Institute and I studied there for another 3 years. So I just got all this other time working with these other principal trumpet players. I got that under my belt, and that was really important. And I think that's why I was able to win further orchestra jobs after I was at Curtis. 'Cause at Curtis, I had all this time, and I was around all of these amazing musicians. They're doing incredible things in their career right now. But I got to be around them when they were in that developmental stage, yeah. So I ended up I won a job with San Diego Symphony and Denver Symphony at the same time. Within like a week or two of each other. And I chose San Diego because it was more sunny. So it was not a musical choice at all.
hey, that makes sense to me.
I was looking at a magazine for San Diego and I was like, oh my God, this would be amazing. And I went out there and I was out there for about 5 years. And then that orchestra folded, San Diego Symphony. Then I was starting to think I was just like bad luck for orchestras. So, but then I had connections from my Boston University Tanglewood days, and one of those connections was principal horn in in Barcelona Symphony. Another one was was just a trumpet player in the orchestra in the Canary Islands. So I went to the Canary Islands and I played principal trumpet with an orchestra there, and it was amazing. The orchestra was really good, and we played all of the big repertoire: Mahler, Bruckner. All the Strauss tone poems, because it was government sponsored. They weren't going to fold. So maybe that kind of was an attraction too. But we just did this amazing repertoire. I played principal trumpet. It was a really good orchestra. And then they needed principal trumpet in Barcelona. And I had to go audition for that. And they had about 120 people from around the world that came and auditioned. And I ended up being the last guy standing. And I ended up playing principal of Barcelona Symphony for a good 4, 5, 6 years before I came back to the States. So yeah, that was basically when I came back to the States. I ended up in Philadelphia, because I went to Curtis and I knew that Philadelphia would be a good place to live. And I played principal with this orchestra called the Chamber Orchestra of Philidephia, but they hardly ever use trumpets. So that's when I really got a chance to develop the Philadelphia Big Brass, the group that's a full-time thing now that we
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a journey. So
Yeah,
you've been all over the place.
I always tell kids, because we work with students a lot, and we always tell them, you never know where you're going to end up. You get a concept in your head, whatever your dream is, it's not going to look exactly like what you're imagining. A lot of times it's going to be better.
So growing up in New Orleans, did you always want to do classical, or was this sounds so well known for jazz? Did you ever consider going to the jazz field, or do you play any jazz?
Not really.
Okay.
I was in jazz class with Ellis when I first was at New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. But it's funny because I think Wynton had left a bunch of recordings in Ellis's studio. So I was always going up there and I was like pulling out these recordings of trumpet players. Timofey Doksticher was one, this Russian trumpet virtuoso, and the other one was Gerard Schwartz, this American trumpet virtuoso. And I used to listen to those records endlessly. And I think Ellis he saw where my interest was. So he's like, you're a classical trumpet player. So you need to follow what your heart is telling you to do. And I just became more and more interested in that side of things. And that's what happens. You don't know which way you're going to go, because there's so many factors that determine what really is going to pull you, what genre will pull you towards itself. Even though you might be interested in other genres, because I listen to a lot of jazz, and I love listening to jazz, and I love being around great jazz players. But the genre that I got pulled towards was the one that I'm doing now mostly is classical. And I'm so thankful that I get to I have multiple orchestras next season that I'm soloing with all around the country, along with the stuff we do with the ensembles, with the big brass. So.
Okay. Wow. So tell us how you got started with the big brass. In fact, just for the listeners, Rodney's going to be not too far from me here in a couple of weeks at the Brevard Music Center, and one of the folks up there managed to get me an introduction to do this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to going to that concert. So tell us how that group got started, and just whatever you want to let us know about that group.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So I don't know how many of your listeners have been to New Orleans, but whenever we do a concert, we usually ask, and a good number of people in the audience have been to New Orleans. And in New Orleans, there's a lot of music on the streets. There's a lot of live performers who are on the street making a living playing music. So when I was in New Orleans Symphony, right before that, the summer before that, I was working at McDonald's because I had been in the McDonald's band. So they gave me a job at McDonald's, and I was terrible. I think I was so bad in the back trying to make the hamburgers, they put me on the front register to work the register. Because the guys were like, no, you gotta sear it and you gotta press it, and I was really bad at it. So then I got my first paycheck from McDonald's. And I don't want to get sued by McDonald's, but geez, it was 2 weeks of work and it was $60. And I was but in the meantime, to my mom's credit, she said, you should go out in the street with your group and play on the street with the brass group. Because she grew up seeing that, growing up around Ellis and everything. And so I did. I pulled together a brass group. We went on the street with a brass quintet. We play all day long. We'd make about $100 each in a day, compared to $60 for 2 weeks of getting screamed at in the kitchen at McDonald's. So I was like, okay, this is a lot better. And it's funny because that group, when I look back who was in that group now, the trombone player now plays principal in a major orchestra in Europe. The French horn player was music director of the New York Philharmonic and now is music director of Hill Auditorium, or I should say executive director of New York Phil. Now he's executive director of Hill Auditorium. The other trumpet player now is executive director of Milwaukee Symphony, and he was principal trumpet of Milwaukee Symphony. that's who was in the band. Our tuba player is a professor down at a major university in Texas. And we just went out there and played. And then so there was a Dixieland group that also was on that same corner. The way we made money was we would play, then I would signal down to that group, and then they would play. So the crowd stayed huge. We never lost the crowd. And that crowd, and there was a little trombone player who was, I remember James was the trumpet player, but the trombone player was his brother. And now I come to find out that was Trombone Shorty. So that was that street corner, and I was just down there just a few weeks ago, and as I looked down at the corner there, and I'm like, yeah, a lot happened on that corner. And especially that's where we developed our method of interacting with the audience, because when you're standing out in the street, there's no barrier between you and the audience. People are walking by, they're practically walking through where you're playing. And a lot of classical music has this barrier that it's weird. It kind of keeps people away. It's classical music. You don't understand this. It keeps them at a distance. Whereas when we were playing classical pieces, but we were doing it in a way that was welcoming and warm for the audience, saying, "Come on, listen to this. Check this out. Look, this is William Tell Overture. Oh, listen to this. This is the West Side Story." So we made it so that people felt like they were part of it. And what we've discovered now that this group, we've traveled all over the world. We've been to Asia, we've been to South America, we've been all over Europe, we've been all over the States. People basically at their core, human beings, are very similar if you treat them a certain way, using music as sort of a thing to bring them together. So, and we learned that on the streets of New Orleans. So that's where the group started, and that's still the feeling of what we do when we play a concert, including we do music from New Orleans, like traditional New Orleans sort of second line sort of music. So yeah, that's how it got started, and that's basically it's what we're still doing the same thing, but we just do it all over the world.
Wow. Oh, so was that like when you were in high school you were doing this?
That was right after high school. That was
okay.
I just graduated. I was I would have been, I guess, in my second year of college.
So you guys just went out and put on a little classical concert on the corner. That's really cool, because it's probably not what people were expecting in New Orleans.
No. But the funny thing is, that's the thing about New Orleans is, because the history of New Orleans with the French and the British and the Spanish and all the different cultures that had a hold of that city at one point or the other, combined with the African influence and the Native American, there's so many cultural influences that you can see in the food, in the architecture, and the very people themselves. When you really do a what do you call it, 23 and you trace their genealogy.
Yeah, 23andMe or whatever.
Yeah, those things. Yeah, that's why the food is so good. It's because there's such a mixture of cultures, of different cultures, the best of so many different cultures. So yeah, I didn't really think of New Orleans as a jazz city growing up. I just felt like it was a cultural place. The art, I was taking art classes when I was in high school, where we were really studying all the different art styles of the 19th and 20th century. And New Orleans is full of artists. So it's a very special place in that way.
I've been there just a couple of times. I need to get back down sometime. I know it's a lot of really cool place to visit. So with the big brass, just looking at your website, it looks like you tour with various different sizes of groups and just kind of have a rotating roster. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, that's taken years to grow, because so when I was in school, I was taught and coached by the Empire Brass when I was at Boston University, and I saw the challenges of having the same 5 members, the challenges that come with that. And the years ago when I decided to do the big brass here in the United States, I wanted to have something much larger where we could draw on a roster of people, but it takes time to develop. So it's been 10 years building this roster of 60, 70 different players. But when we go out, we go out with 7 players or 10. But now we can draw from that roster, and so it depends on who's available. But our players, they're people like Terry Everson, who's principal of the Boston Pops when they go on tour. So when he's not with them, if he's available, he'll come out with us, or the principal trumpet of Nashville Symphony. When he can, he'll come out and play with us. So we are able to get that high level of players because we have such a deep, long, huge roster of musicians. Everyone has been playing the show now for at least 5, 6, 7 years. So it takes one rehearsal for us to feel comfortable, and it's also very important for us that it's not just that the group is a reflection of America, that the group is a reflection of the strength of diversity of this country, men, women, people from all different walks of life. So that's what we look like on stage, and it's not engineered. It's just that's just what ends up happening because that's who's on our roster, and it's based on who's available at the time. So so that's how we've been doing it for the last at least 10 years or so.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your personnel list here. That's kind of a who's who of brass players in the U.S. Jens Lindemann and J.D. Shaw. I know J.D.'s down here in South Carolina now at USC.
Love J.D. J.D. went with us to China. We had a great time. He's an amazing arranger and fabulous French horn player. So yeah.
Is there a core group that you start with as the default, and then
it's kind of a core group that we do have, and that's actually when this tour in North Carolina, that's our core group that's going to be with us because we are doing I think 4 concerts in North Carolina, and then we have to run up to Philadelphia to play the Keswick Theater, and then come back down to North Carolina. But it's a core group of 7 players that we'll have. It's really it's 6 brass players and 1 drummer, and we have like 2 or 3 drummers that can play with us. But and when you with the core group, truth is we barely need to rehearse. I kind of send those guys, here's the set list, and we'll rehearse to get a feel for the hall because each hall is a little different acoustically. A lot of people are worried about getting a group that's too big, like brass. They get worried it's going to be too loud. But when you have classically trained players, they're very sensitive to to making sure that it's not too loud, and it's very different. It's not like a very loud blasting sort of sound. It's really refined what happens as far as the style of the group.
Well, I saw Monosel brass last year down at University of Georgia, and I was in like the 7th or 8th row right in the middle. I got to say that was loud.
I love those guys.
They're hilarious as well as just being ridiculously good.
Yeah.
So who's in the band that's going to be touring in North Carolina?
Oh, geez. I'm gonna have to look at the roster because I can always tell you the trumpet's really fast. I know who it is. It's me and Terry Everson, the guy who say plays on tour with Boston Pops, and he's a principal he's the trumpet player, a trumpet teacher at Boston University. His son, Peter Everson, who is also an amazing trumpet player, has been playing with us a lot lately. Who else is trumpet on this tour? Tim Hudson is a North Carolina guy.
Oh yeah, he teaches up at Gardner Webb, which is just about 45 minutes from me.
That's right. Yep, Tim's going to do a couple of concerts with us on this run. And my old roommate James Betancourt, he's a guy. He was the head of the NATO band in Europe. And he just came back to the States. He's kind of getting towards the end part of his career, and he's very high up in the military as far as band directors. So he's based in Georgia right now, and he's going to come join us for some shows. And of course, I talk about the trumpet players first, but our French horn player is Natalie Higgins. She's from the West Coast, so she's going to come over and do this run of concerts. Our trombone player is Greg Freeman. He's based in the DC area. And our tuba player for this concert is Matt Vasco, so the tuba player from Boston Symphony reached out to me, and he's like, "You should look at Higher in the Sky." And Boston, because of people like Sam Palafian, there's a strong legacy of great chamber tuba players from Boston. And so when the principal of Boston Symphony tells you this is the guy for your group, I took it seriously, and Ben's doing a great job. And our drummer is our regular drummer, Ben Goldman, who plays with us all the time. This is really a group that, we wouldn't need to rehearse because everyone knows what everyone does, that's going to be, that's for this whole North Carolina tour. That's the group that we're going to have.
Okay. Can you tell us what you're going to be playing?
Yeah, little bits of it. The sort of traditional New Orleans stuff, like Closer Walk. What else is New Orleans? There's a sort of a New Orleans second line that we do at the end of the show, where we march through the audience doing the second line. We do music of John Philip Sousa, some of his traditional marches. We find that audiences all over the country, that people love the Sousa marches, and I think it kind of reminds them of their childhood, hearing the bands go by, and so we always do that. Some things by Leonard Bernstein, who was a big influence on a lot of us. I had a good fortune to actually work with him as a conductor and coach, and so we always do something by Leonard Bernstein.
I think I saw that one of the videos on your YouTube had some of that. Are you doing the Jack Gale arrangements?
Yeah, we're doing we're pulling some movements out of that. The West Side Story, and there's some Bach that we're gonna do. There's a new arrangement. We started doing this Bach Vivaldi concerto. That's where I'm playing some piccolo trumpet stuff, and really beautiful music. And some other Bach that we're doing, some kind of standard contrapunctus 9 sort of thing. So a piece by Harry James that Harry James wrote for himself. So that we do that one a lot. We're doing some works. Piece by Elvis, Can't Help Falling in Love, and as you can see, it's kind of a mixed bag as far as genre.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's what makes brass concerts fun. You can play just about anything.
Yep.
Have you been to Brevard before?
I have not.
Okay.
Brevard. Yeah, I've heard about it. I had a lot of friends who did the summer program there, but I have not been. When I was in the summers, I used to go to Eastern Music Festival. That's where I went, and so that's where I first heard about Brevard, because I've had some friends who went to the program later, to the summer program. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to actually see Brevard. I've never been there. So
yeah, they've got a brand new auditorium that you guys are going to be playing in, and I've been to Brevard a number of times, but never been to this auditorium. I think it's just like the second year that they're using it, so should be very nice.
Yeah, and I'm excited that they're bringing a brass group in, because I know that's what people get. They get nervous if it's not a huge place. So it'll be great for us to go there and kind of show them that, bring brass groups, because we want them to bring other brass groups after us in there. So we'll do our best to to make sure they see that brass will work in this size venue.
And nothing against a string quartet or anything, but brass is so much. It's so much more fun to play brass. Okay.
Very true.
All right. Do you have other tours planned for later on in the year then?
Let's see. So we have this North Carolina tour, which kind of has this one Philadelphia thing in it. And then this summer, we're going to be going to the Bach Oregon Festival has invited us to come back again. And I believe we're playing sort of an outdoor thing for them. I don't know the exact details, but I think it's sort of in a ballpark sort of thing, like with a lot of people. So that'll be fun. And then we're playing in Sandusky, Ohio, and then Chautauqua, the large amphitheater. They've invited us back in August. Oh, I'm sorry, Chautauqua is in July, and we're going to play in that theater, in the amphitheater again. So that'll be fun. So it's a lot of fun things in the summer, and then starting in September, there's an orchestra in Wisconsin that they're going to feature us. And then every month there's just something somewhere in the United States. There's a lot of touring happening now. It's great. It's exciting. I mean, it's because, after COVID with the shutdown, but now things are really cranking back up. So yeah, it should be fun.
Okay. I just was looking on your website. You do like a brass seminar as well?
Oh, right. Yeah, we do. They're called retreats, and they're in North Carolina, um, and they're in the Outer Banks. And what we do is we have we rent one of these big mansions on the beach, and we'll have a few guest artists. And our guest artists have been people like uh, Jose Cibaja from Boston Brass, or we'll bring in the principal tuba from New York Philharmonic, or usually there's someone who's really well known. Jens Lindemann has done a bunch of them. So, which means that having Jens there means it's really going to be fun. So we'll bring them in as guest artists, usually 2 or 3, and then we'll bring in older players and younger players. So we'll have and players who are comeback players, and there's people who are just coming back. There's people who are retired and they do it for fun. We had like a guy. He was like a medical doctor who was like a world class Olympic athlete, but his family, for a gift, they gave him this trumpet retreat thing, because it's not like a competition or anything. It's just people, they get up, they play, they get critiqued by these professional players, and it's kind of like fantasy league baseball. These fantasy. It's kind of like that for brass, and
Okay.
and then we hang out in the house all together, and we hang out on the beach, we make dinner together, and it's gone back. Gosh, we've been doing it for a good 12, 14 years now, I think.
Did you do one up around like Boone, North Carolina at one time? Or some, I was trying to think. A friend of mine, I think, went to one of those seminars a few years back. I can't remember where it was.
Boone is a beautiful area. I'd love to do one in Boone.
Okay.
We have done in different places. We've done them in New Orleans.
Okay.
We did one in the mountains of North Carolina. Wait a minute. We did do one in Boone, or it was in the mountains.
Boone is definitely in the mountains.
Yeah, we actually did. I forgot. I'm
Okay.
sorry. We did one. It was called. We did like a mountain retreat. It's more of a smaller one, but we did do one there. Ashley Hall, who's a fabulous cornet player, she was the guest artist for that one.
Okay.
And then we just recently did one in the in the Cayman Islands, where that was kind of the first one after the pandemic that we did. And people signed up for it, and we went to the Cayman Islands and had one there. So we're going to do it again. It's going to happen in January. It's going to be the first one where we come back to North Carolina, and we're going to do it in the Outer Banks, most likely. So
Yeah, North Carolina's a wide state. That's a long way from Boone.
yeah,
It's a but yeah, that would be a fabulous way to spend a week, I think.
yeah. And the cool thing is that when you have the young players now, some of them are at the point. Well, one of them especially. I remember her name is Sophie. Her parents would come with her, and they would, because she was younger, and so they were their chaperones. She did it a few years. She got so good, we started inviting her on tour with our group, like as a professional. And she's not even finished college. She's made a great choice, and she's studying with 2 of our most famous teachers down in Texas. So she's still studying, but she improved so much. She went on tour with us about 6-7 months ago. So that's cool to see. And there's more stories like that of people who've done the retreat. You see their progress, and then now they're college professors, or they're freelance players doing what they want to do, or they're on the brink of winning an orchestra job. So it's pretty cool.
How many people do you typically have for one of those, as far as like students?
It's funny. I did some research on that, about what the best size for learning is, and so we usually have somewhere between 10 and 15. That seems to be a good. Malcolm Gladwell had a book he wrote, and he talked about this part about what tends to be the good size for learning. When it's too small, people are almost afraid to talk up. When it's too big, people don't get a chance to talk up. So there's tons of a number for a group that's really good for learning. So that's what we do. We hit between 10 and 15, I would say, is kind of seems to be an ideal number.
Okay. Heck, maybe I'll sign up for that myself.
Hey,
Looks like a lot of fun.
Not just trumpet. People think that's just trumpet, but we've had tuba players come and we've had French horn players, we've had trombone players. So it's open to all brass instruments. And I try to bring guest artists so that everyone feels like they're getting something out of the guest artist.
Yeah, you mentioned Jens. I've had a chance to meet and play with Jens one time. He came and played concert here in town with our big band, and
oh, nice.
He was quite an interesting character.
That's a good way to.
Yeah, he had he had kind of a throwdown battle with our lead sax player in front of the auditorium, where they went at it for about 10 minutes playing riffs off each other, and it was really fun. And then he paid for all the beers afterwards. All right, well, Rodney, anything else you want to tell us about? Any your personal solo tours or anything else you want us to know about your group or anything?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. We're just thankful to have so many concerts in North Carolina. North Carolina gave me a really good start at Eastern Music Festival, and so it's a place that's very dear to me. And so to get a chance to come back and tour around in North Carolina, we're just thrilled to get a chance to do that.
Okay, yeah, let's mention that concert. We'll make sure that everybody knows when that's going to be. That is April 27th, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. at Brevard Music Center. So you can get your tickets at brevardmusic.org. I'm sure it'll be a great show. I'll be there.
Yay!
So, okay. All right, Rodney, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.